Welcome back to another episode of Won't Be Silent. I'm thrilled to introduce you to a friend of mine of a long time when I lived in New York City, Natalia Petrozella, and she is working on a project that's so awesome that I'm just going to let her introduce it herself.
Awesome. Abe, I'm so glad to see you. It's been a long time. Okay, so I am a historian and I am the lead scholar on this brand new exciting program called Jewish Americans in United States History Hidden Voices. So before I tell you what's in there, I want to tell you that this program is available to all educators, parents, community members, whoever who are interested in integrating Jewish American stories into social studies, US history. So it's for you. It's free on the internet. Volume one is out now. Abe is going to share the link in the show notes. So what is it? Okay.
Before you guys want to throw in there that what I love about this is that it's telling stories of individuals in American history that otherwise you're not going to get until you kind of take the time to share, to check out what Natalia's been doing.
Well, thank you. So Hidden Voices is a program that's existed in the New York City Department of Education since 2018, and they exist for different groups, but there was never a Jewish American Hidden Voices curriculum until right now. And the idea behind it is that it highlights hidden voices, so groups that maybe have been erased or kind of overlooked in US history, but also within those groups, they're not always the most famous people that you've already heard about. Sometimes they are, but we also like to highlight folks that maybe are not on the most famous like Jews in America.
I mean,
So,
everybody knows about Emma Lazarus, right?
yes, totally.
And Levi Strauss.
Mhm.
Tell about the guy that was part of the Civil War.
Absolutely. Well, I'll just jump right in. So let me say, actually, before I do that, Abe, if it's okay, basically what you have is this book, also on the internet, which is profiles of Jews in US history with primary sources, with questions for elementary, middle, and high schoolers. Then there are these kind of like overarching essays that tell you, how do I fit this in when I'm teaching about the Civil War, about the colonial era, or whatever. So we're trying to make it really easy for teachers who are interested in including more Jewish content into their lessons. But back to the Civil War, Abe. So one person you may not have heard of, who was one of our profiles, is Edward Selig Solomon. So he fought in the Civil War. He was a Union soldier, and his military valor was so great that he actually helped move the needle on anti-Semitism at that time. And so one thing, like Abe and I were talking before, you don't often think of Abraham Lincoln having a role in like Jewish history or even, engaging with Jews necessarily. It's not kind of the dominant story that we have. Well, Abraham Lincoln, actually, one of the things that he did in response to Salomon and other Jews' military valor was that he really took concrete steps to support Jews in the military. One thing he did is he changed the chaplaincy laws so that Jews and other non-Christians could be chaplains. And then, and this is really important, General Ulysses S. Grant, he had issued this extremely anti-Semitic order called Order 11, which was meant to expel Jews as a class out of captured territory under his command. And the idea was that Jews are involved in the black market and the cotton trade, and like we don't want them around. Lincoln was outraged, and he was partly inspired by people like Solomon, who were showing that they were these great patriots, and he pushed back on that and had it revoked. And so to me, that's such an interesting story because every kid is going to learn about the Civil War, I hope. But never do you learn this story about Solomon, or do you hear really about identity in this clash, which is for understandable reasons. Usually you learn about, black enslaved people and like white abolitionists or white Southerners. And this kind of Jewish piece, I think, is really important and interesting. So that's like one person you might not have heard of, but who played a really significant role.
No, I think that's what's really most interesting and valuable about what you're doing is hoping to kind of have people look at Jews in early American history. I mean, for me, even as a Jew in America, I always think about, Hollywood, and since my family came from after the concentration camp, like
Right, right.
perfect, but that's what I think of Jews.
Oh my gosh. And it goes so much deeper. I mean, one of our goals is for people to understand you can't understand US history without Jewish history. And we've been here since the beginning. I mean, one of the first groups that we talk about here, the first Jews to come to, it's not the US yet, but to the land that became the US, they were Sephardic and they came from Brazil. They were fleeing persecution from Recife, Brazil, where there's a beautiful synagogue still, by the way. 23 of them show up in New Amsterdam. It just got commemorated here as Landing Day. It's in September. And they really started one of the first like formal Jewish communities in the US. And there's so much interesting there. But one of the interesting things is that in order to be allowed to live there by the so-called liberal Dutch, who were actually not that liberal when it came to having Jews live among them, they had to promise that they would not become dependents of the Dutch government. So from the jump, they had to show like we're self-sufficient, like we won't bother you, just leave us alone and we won't become, we won't be poor, or indigent, or demand aid.
Which is kind of like just shows you that hating Jews is what started them being peddlers in order to be able to kind of be self-sufficient.
Oh, totally. I mean, there's so much in here, like getting right up even to the current day. I mean, not quite current, but like well into like the 60s, that shows that like Jews have constantly had to kind of make the best of being excluded from a lot of like conventional institutions, whether that's quotas in universities and schools, whether that's country club lists once Jews had more money. But that's really the story of Jews in Hollywood, for example, to use what you were talking about, or Jews in the tailor industry, in the I want to say schmata trade, but you know what I'm talking about, which is where my family kind of came into it. But so much of that, working in these kind of industries with low barrier to entry or creating those industries, that's so much the Jewish story.
Yeah, and there's a thing, I know that you're in with volume one, which leads
Yeah.
in when does it cut
It
off?
ends like at the beginning of the 20th century. So like with industrialization, basically.
Right. So the other thing is that I just recently saw a documentary called "We Met at Grossinger's," which talks about that time in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yes.
We were excluded from all kind of organizations and country clubs and hotels and resorts, and that's what. So that's like the best part of American post World War II Judaism, which
Yeah.
of course, yikes, whatever. But
Totally.
until the 20th century, because I think what you're doing is so out of pocket, like out of unexpected, like who you don't even think that these people exist, and you're giving them stories. The whole thing about what's going to save the Jews, which I feel very strongly about now, is the more stories we tell about who we are and what we do
Right.
and how we kind of live to help others and help ourselves, and kind of we're altruistic by accident or by nature or by force, right? And
Yeah.
that
And
is, I believe, is what's coming out of this thing, having not.
totally. And I think you're so right about this Jewish stories as being something that can kind of save us and invigorate us and inspire us as a people, and also maybe make us less hated. Although I firmly believe that it's not up to Jews to solve the anti-Semitism problem, right? Like, you guys figure out why you hate us so much. But I also think like that's your issue. That's a you problem, as my kids would say. But I also think that like it's what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I also think that like it's something I'll just speak for myself, but anecdotally, I know I'm not alone in this, that like, a lot of us did feel privileged enough as just Americans and people in the world that like we didn't feel like we had to amplify or center those Jewish stories as a part of, existing and thriving in the world. And I mean, one of the things I kind of talk about when I do like longer workshops about this is like, well, why have Jews not really been incorporated into these kind of identity-based curricula? And like part of that, I think, is there's been this focus on so-called underrepresented minorities. Jews are not an underrepresented minority. If anything, I won't say we're overrepresented, but we have defied our statistics to actually be present in a lot of aspects of society. And so once you start like caring only about underrepresented minorities, then you leave Jews out. Then I think there's another very idiotic fallacy, which is like, well, Jews are just like a special flavor of white people. That is so ahistorical and stupid and damaging. But that serves as like another kind of excuse or justification to not deal with Jews or anti-Semitism. And so this curriculum really pushes back on that.
I want to jump in on that note because in my book, Won't Be Silent, Don't Stop Till It Matters, when I addressed I was bused to an all black high school or
Mhm.
primarily black high school. Now, we had started out like kind of lower middle class, but my dad had worked us on up. So we moved up to a more affluent neighborhood where it was
Mhm.
too small to have its own high school. So we got bused. And I knew because I had parents who were survivors that I was not this white American thing. I always knew I was other anyway. So
Yeah,
trying to and it was like try to explain that to people and all the white kids got the shit kicked out of them in their school
right,
back in
right.
the 70s. It was wild times,
Yeah.
racial and inequality. It was insane. But like there's a line in my books that try to explain to someone who's about to kick the shit out of you that I'm not white. You know what I mean?
No.
So
Yeah, no, and we deal with all of that. Like, how did that idea that Jews became white come to take hold? I mean, some of it is because we live in a country that really divides people into black and white. And like I mean, at least Ashkenazi Jews who could kind of pass for white and who wanted to for understandable reasons, like they fit more into that white bracket. But then there's also a really interesting interpretation too, which is, until World War II in the United States, Jews were like nobody would say Jews were white. This is like the Semitic race. Then, when World War II happens and the Allies are fighting against Nazi Germany, and they see that that kind of thinking leads you to the like final solution in the gas chambers, I mean, most Americans like think that's like not a good end, right? And so that kind of like scientific racism that makes Jews a different race, that really lost favor among the kind of like intellectually respectable people. And there's this, I'm sure you read this article in The Atlantic by Franklin Foer. It was so depressing. It's called The Golden Age of American Jewry is Ending. And it kind of starts with that post World War II moment where it's a really quick change, like where all of a sudden being like casually or more than casually anti-Semitic becomes like, you're like a Nazi, dude. Like that's like not a thing you want to be. And that really lasting, I think he would argue until like 10/7, where we saw, a kind of much more full-throated anti-Semitic voices on left and right take hold. So,
I mean, look, there's never going to be an answer to, hate it's in all of us,
yeah.
and those who act upon it are the ones that, really should be the ones on a cattle car ending up in the camp, like my grandparents, as opposed to the people who find a way forward and find a way to be part of the world together. That's kind of
Mhm.
what's going on overseas, but just to keep it more centered on what I think is so incredible. And I also think a lot of these stories, what's interesting from a storyteller, which is what I am, and interesting,
Yeah.
which is why I am going to pour through this thing, is
Thank
because
you.
Hollywood needs stories that's not only about October 7th and the Holocaust.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean,
It,
I
end of statement.
100%.
Stories that we can tell that it's not about Jew, but coincidentally they're a Jew. You know what I
Yeah. And it's also not about Jews just as victims of like, murderous violence. I mean,
mean? It's about
I was,
heroes. It's about, every good film is a hero's journey, right?
right, right.
From the Abraham Lincoln kind of champion.
Yeah.
Oh,
Although it's so interesting, yes, and it was really important to us. We had to kind of walk a fine line because, like, good historians, like, we don't love heroes. Maybe we're like not so Hollywood suited in that way. Like, once you have these like historical figures who are just like two-dimensional heroes, like, one, no one's really totally a hero. Two, that's like kind of boring. Like, people are complicated. So we wanted to kind of shy away. We definitely, I mean, these are serious scholars writing all these essays. So it's not just like, this is the greatest person in the world. That being said, wait, it's super important that, like, on balance, you're reading one of these profiles and you come away with a positive sense of how Jews contributed to the world. And it's even harder, actually, to do that with this because since teachers can pick and choose which profile, they might just pick one. So, like with any group of people, there's some people who are on balance, like, bad guys, right? And so we didn't include them because, for example, I'll take a really extreme version. Judah Benjamin, do you know who that was? Jew, vice president of the Confederacy. Okay. Let's just say I don't want a kid to read about one Jew in US history, and it's like the vice president of the Confederacy, right? So we pick Solomon instead. And so those feel like intellectually and civically responsible choices that aren't whitewashing anything. It's just
Yeah,
being real.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I get it, and that's not necessarily sugarcoating it, but that is an interesting story because they're both at the
totally.
same time on the opposite ends of the thing.
Right.
That to me is like, girl, I'm kind of Steven Spielberg and get that, even though he already did the Lincoln thing, so we wouldn't. And he kind of denied the project about my uncle, which was a Holocaust story. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and he's been kind of quiet about October 7th altogether, so don't even get me started.
Yeah.
In any event, I am so proud of you. I am
Thank you.
share this with people. I don't, I'm no educator, honey. I'm a college dropout
Ooh.
and, whatever.
Takes all kinds,
What
seriously.
I love about it is the fact that it's storytelling from a perspective that's unexpected,
Yeah,
fresh,
thank you.
Jewish, but not only because it's in context to American history.
Yeah.
And I'm like kvelling, and I'm really proud of you. And I'm
Thank
so glad
you.
that, Natalia did an Instagram thing about it, and it went on for more than 15 seconds, which most people probably slipped away, but it was on like 3 minutes, and I watched it, and I was like,
6 minutes. It was so long.
I felt like three. But I reached out, like in the abstract, just hello, and yeah, I mean, so we have our spiritual connection from the New York days through this program that she and I used to be part of, which was actually spiritual and physical all wrapped up in one. So you
Mhm.
lost weight and found your higher power and moved on
Win-win. Yeah.
for a drink. No, I'm kidding. And here you are years later doing something that Zionistic me feels so proud of.
Thank you, Abe. And by the way, I have been so inspired seeing you. I mean, we're connected from our old days, really from the gym. And I'm like scrolling and I'm like, wow, he's like really activated on this Jewish thing. Like, wow, he's like really speaking out. Wow. And I it's been inspiring to me. And also like, I don't know if you feel this way too, but like I also kind of breathe this sigh of relief of like, okay, like I like what he's saying. We're on board because there's so many people who I've known for years who then I saw the kind of things that they were saying and posting after 10/7, and I'm like, I didn't know you at all, or like I didn't know that you had this side of you, and it was very alienating, I think. And so you were one of those people. I'm like,
Long-time friends,
yeah,
period. And, look, you know what? I want to know who my friend. I don't need friends and I don't need followers. I need people who are of like mind, who just want a peaceful way forward. If you're anti-Semitic, as far as I'm concerned, having parents who survived the Holocaust, you deserve what happened to my grandparents. I am very clear about that. I don't care how violent that sounds. I won't do it, but that's what you should get because hate
yeah,
just generates more hate. And
totally.
we can't get much more hate than we have going now. But that
No,
woke me up to realize, I mean, I really first had my first wake up call when the Nazis were marching in Charlottesville. That was my first, like,
yeah,
being grateful that my parents are not alive is not a great way to think. You know what I
right, right.
is when I was like, okay, I got to do something. So I've been activated since, and now that I'm a member, I'm a board on the board of the American Zionist movement. I'm like, hey, I'm living up to my parents' ideals of what America is.
So great. I know, I know. And that's, I think, so important. Like, one of the things we're just trying to focus on is like Jewish history is American history, right? There are great people who are doing the 3,000 years of like Jewish civilization or really targeted stuff about the Middle East. That's amazing. We need it. This is not that?
This
So,
this is actually now here more important.
well, we need everyone. But thank you for
I don't
saying
know, but in terms of history, nobody thinks about American history and Jews.
right, right. I mean, some people do, but it's
You know what I mean?
Oh, well, let me add just like one little piece there, which I think is interesting. So I did this teacher workshop last week, I think it was, and I was talking about Levi Strauss, another person in here, and I was talking about like how he's so interesting because I mean, we all know the genes, right? But he like went out to the West with the gold rushers and he was outfitting them, and so much of that came from the fact that Jews were so active as tailors that he had that experience in that trade, and he went and he took it westward. And this one teacher was there, and he's like, "Oh my God," he's like, I teach about Levi Strauss. I've like never even thought about the fact that he's Jewish or like what that has to do with like his whole story. And I'm like, that's not his fault because you know what? Most teacher curricula are not focused on that. Oh, and the other piece that's so interesting about him is when he went out west, like he actually found in some ways that there was much less anti-Semitism because of a much more fluid society. This is like the 1850s in the American West, very different from like the crowded East Coast cities where there are lots of Jews, right? And so with that, yeah, comes acceptance and all that, but also comes a lot of people with like highly formed anti-Semitic attitudes. And he's like, what an interesting take on westward expansion and all that. I'm like, there you go.
Yeah, they were too busy trying to look for gold. You know what I mean? To hate Jews. But once
Right.
they got the gold, they were like, all right, now I hate the Jews.
Now we can get in. Yeah. So that kind of stuff is like I love that too because there are these like unfamiliar people that people might not know, but then there are the people like you thought you knew, but hey, there's this whole other angle too.
No, no, this is so great. I am so proud
You.
of you. I adore you, and your energy is
Well,
just infectious. And yeah, so when volume 2 comes out, we're going to regroup. And anything that happens that I can possibly have any positive impact on, I'll let you know for sure.
thank you so much.
You're the cutest.
Ah, great.
You
Wait,
are.
we need to take a picture. Hold on.